Our government has been working hard to supply military aid to Ukraine, and one of the things that the Ukrainian Defense Minister, Minister Resnikov, asked me directly for was cameras for drones for use in combat. And right here in Canada, we have L3 Harris, formerly Westcam, that produces these very important cameras for drones, which now the Government of Canada has purchased 56 of to be used directly in combat. We have sent 50 of those cameras already, and we just recently announced the purchase of 6 additional cameras.
How much are these six cameras? There must be a bundle.
Well, let me take a step back and talk about the amount of money that we are committing under budget 2022 for military aid to Ukraine. We're committing $500 million, and the cameras are part and parcel of that $500 million spend. We also announced last week the purchase of 39 LAVs, vehicles produced also at GDLS in London, Ontario. So you can see these are all items that Ukraine is asking Canada directly to provide, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay. How much of a difference is this Canadian technology, or this Canadian equipment making in Ukraine and the fight against Russia?
I can't tell you how important it is. Wherever I go, I am thanked by the Ukrainian Defense Minister, by the Ukraine contact group that Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense of the United States, has put together for the way in which Canada is able to directly respond to the needs that the Ukrainians have from a military perspective. And the cameras produced at L3 Harris, a company that we just toured before coming here, are so very important. This company has approximately 1,300 employees. They come from this area, and they are working day and night to produce these cameras for use in Ukraine.
Okay. Can you quantify how much of a difference it makes for the Ukrainians to have this kind of technology?
Well, I think, again, we have to remember that the relationship between Ukraine and Canada is very strong, and the Canadian Armed Forces have trained over 33,000 members of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. So the relationship already from a military standpoint is very close between our two countries. Then this illegal war breaks out with the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and Canada steps up to the plate to respond to it in terms of military aid, Carl Gustaf anti-tank weapon system, hand grenade, fragmentation vests, cameras for drones produced right here in this region, as well as armored vehicles. We will continue to do whatever we can to support Ukraine.
Okay, so these cameras on the drones, they're allowing the Ukrainians to take out Russian tanks and things like that, Russian artillery?
It allows the Ukrainian army to have precision with its shots. And so that's exactly what you're saying in your question, that we have more precision because of the very high-end technology that L3 Harris is able to provide with its cameras for drones. And there are multiple different types of cameras, but we, of course, from the government standpoint, are providing exactly what Ukraine is asking for.
We see Russia really seems to be consolidating its positions in eastern Ukraine, and they seem to be making progress that they weren't making at the beginning of this attack on Ukraine. This kind of technology that the West is sending, Canada and the West, is it just slowing down the Russian advance, just sort of delaying the inevitable that the Russians are going to take what they want in Ukraine?
Not at all. This is a full-scale effort, not only by Canada, but members of NATO and beyond, to ensure that Ukraine has the military aid it needs to fight and win this war. And you have seen a number of military successes on the part of the Ukrainians. Snake Island is one of the more recent ones. But let's be clear, there is resolve on the part of the Ukrainians as well as NATO countries to stand with Ukraine so that it can maintain its security, its stability, and most importantly, its sovereignty as a democratic country. This is a threat to the rules-based international order that has kept us all safe since the end of the Second World War. With Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, we all are standing together to ensure that that world order remains stable and protected.
Okay. Do you see this Russian invasion of Ukraine ending without a confrontation with the West?
We are fully supportive of Ukraine, but we are also making sure that we supply Ukraine with the military aid that it needs, and we are also prepared to defend every inch of NATO territory under Article 5 of the Washington Treaty for sure. It says that an attack on one is an attack on all, and so we will continue to fortify the eastern flank of NATO, for example, as we announced at the NATO summit in Madrid just recently, in order to ensure that we as a NATO alliance are standing strong.
And you think it can be done without a direct confrontation with Russia?
Nobody knows what Vladimir Putin's next move will be. What we have to continue to do is to support Ukraine with military, economic, and humanitarian aid. And we need to stand together as allies and as a NATO alliance to ensure the protection and the upholding of the rules-based international order, and that's exactly what we will do.
Okay. Just one more question on Ukraine, then a couple other things to move on to. Your assessment of how things are going in Ukraine right now, what's your reading of how the war is the situation the war is in?
Every day, Russian soldiers are committing atrocities in an otherwise sovereign democratic country called Ukraine. And the response that the Ukrainian armed forces and the Ukrainian people as a whole have been able to provide has been inspiring, and it shows a resilience and a commitment to their country and to the principles of democracy that we all hold dear. And therefore, I would highly commend Minister Resnikov, my colleague and friend in Ukraine, the defense minister, for the work that he is doing to ensure that Ukraine continues to stand strong against this illegal invasion.
And you think Ukraine can eventually win?
I do. And I believe that this is the road that we are on now as allies to support Ukraine in its effort to fight and win this war.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about China, too. There's the Chinese planes buzzing the Canadian
Yes.
CF-18s. Why is China doing this? What's going on?
Well, let's take a step back and understand that the Canadian planes in that region are monitoring UN sanctions that are being applied against North Korea. So there is a legitimate purpose for Canadian aviators to be in that region. When China and Chinese aircraft come so close to the RCAF operating in that region, it puts the lives of RCAF pilots at risk. And this actually occurred to the extent that these pilots had to divert their path in order to avoid collision. That is very dangerous and very difficult, especially when Canada is in the region, simply to enforce the UN sanctions.
Why would China be doing this?
This is a question, again, that only China can answer. What we need to do as global citizens and as committed members of the United Nations and the rules-based international order is to uphold our obligations. And that's exactly what we were doing in terms of monitoring those UN sanctions. And I will say that we are dealing with this through diplomatic channels, and we do hope that it will not continue.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about a non-defense question, but a cabinet level question. The chaos that we've seen at the airports, this is one of the things on people's minds these days. Delayed flights, lost luggage, canceled flights. What do you make of this? How is this going to be resolved?
Well, I'll just say that I think we are all feeling the effects of coming through the pandemic that lasted for 2.5 years, and indeed case numbers are still on the rise. We need to make sure that we are working very hard to create efficient and effective systems. I myself have been caught in airports, and it is a very difficult time. But I really hope that the efficiency and the efficacy of air travel will continue to improve. I see that Air Canada has cut the number of flights that it is operating in an effort to create more efficiencies at the airports, and hopefully this will make a difference.
Okay. Any thought of eliminating the ArriveCAN app, which seems to be one of the things that's slowing people down and sort of an annoyance for travelers?
That is an issue I believe that Minister Mendicino is examining at the current time. Of course, that's not in the defense portfolio, and so I will leave that question with him.
Okay. And back to the defense portfolio, just one other issue, the report on sexual misconduct in the military and the problems with trying to get some change. Why is it so difficult to get this change in the military?
Large systems and large institutions require full-scale effort to ensure that long-lasting change occurs. When Madame Arbour presented her report to me, I indicated that we will move to immediately implement 17 of the 48 recommendations that she had in the report. 2 of those recommendations involve appointing an external monitor to oversee the implementation of the recommendations and to report to Parliament, which I will do in the fall. In addition to that, we are making sure that we pay close attention to the need for change. As I said when I was appointed to be minister last year, cultural change in the military is my top priority because we need to ensure that every Canadian Armed Forces member can operate in a safe, protected, and respected manner. And unless we have an institution where that is possible, we will not be able to undertake the very important missions that we have at home and abroad, and we won't be able to recruit in a way that we need to in order to make sure that the Canadian Armed Forces is strong going into the long term.
Why is it so difficult to change this, though? There have been numerous reports. This has been going on for quite a long time. Why is it so difficult to get this change?
Well, I want to reiterate that institutional change, as a matter of fact, is difficult, and in the Canadian Armed Forces, where we have a culture that has been in existence where women suffer sexual harassment and sexual misconduct, those systems need to be carefully looked at and changed. And that's exactly what we are doing as a government, as the Canadian Armed Forces, as the Department of National Defence to ensure occurs. We have the Sexual Misconduct Response Centre, for example, which offers 24/7 assistance to those who are suffering from sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. And we have a number of additional initiatives. For example, in November 2021, I accepted the interim recommendation of Madame Arbour to move the sexual misconduct and sexual harassment cases under the criminal code from the military justice system to the civilian justice system. These are the large-scale types of institutional changes that need to occur in order for women to feel safe, protected, and respected in the Canadian Armed Forces. But it's not just women, it's all minorities. It's LGBTQ2+, it's racialized minorities, and we need to make sure that this is an institution that can operate free from discrimination and harassment across the board.